Welcome to the new channel Quarantined This, a place where, once the cinemas reopen after this wonderful quarantine that seems to be happening thanks to the coronavirus, while we have time to wait for the pandemic of late responses to blow over, much like the virus already has, let's delve deeper into this channel. We will be doing movie reviews, game reviews, and then probably descending into talking a load of balls like most channels do. So without the long ass dialogue that most channels give you before diving into their videos, let's just dive straight into the history of film, part 1, which starts way back in 1796, where the first inoculation of smallpox happens thanks to the English Dr. Edward Jenner. Catherine the Great died to be succeeded by Paul I of Russia, who took the Romanov throne away from her husband. While in Germany, an unknown artist, Alois Senefelder from Bavaria, discovered that you could duplicate images that had been drawn or written using greasy crayon on slabs of limestone, then printing them with rolled-on ink. Limestone relentlessly retained the marks from the crayons, which allowed you to produce the image many times over. Thus the lithograph, from the Latin stone litho and mark graph, was invented. Also in 1796, Napoleon Bonaparte was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the French army in Italy. Napoleon also married his first wife, Josephine de Prohanias, who was 32 and whose name was changed to Rose. Not surprisingly. However, this next part doesn't involve Bonaparte, so no need to stoop. Napoleon Bonaparte died in 1822, but the man this first part does centre around fought in his army. Joseph Niepce. Now, a bit of a sidebar. By 1830, persistence of vision, where the brain to retain images cast upon the retina of the eye for a fraction of a second beyond their disappearances from field of sight, and phi phenomenon, which creates apparent movement between images when they succeed one another rapidly, were already discovered and understood. Now, getting back to Joseph Niepce, who was dismissed from Napoleon's army due to ill health and settled at his hometown of Chalon-sur-Saône, it's here that the story really begins, with his lifelong engagement into research. Because I guess research was just a thing back then, and you could be appointed research as long as you were researching anything. And in 1807, Niepce and his brother Claude invented an internal combustion engine that they called the pyreolofer, derived from the Greek words of fire, wind, and I produce. So not quite earth, wind, and fire. This isn't the story of the automobile though, this is the story of film. And in 1813, lithography became a fashionable hobby in France. Niepce began to experiment with this printing technique. However, he wasn't skilled in the arts and was unable to obtain proper lithographic stone locally, so he sought a way to provide images automatically. He coated pewter with various light-sensitive substances in an effort to copy superimposed gravings in sunlight. In April 1816, he attempted photography, which he called heliography, meaning sun drawing. He recorded a view from his workroom window on paper sensitized with silver chloride, but was only partially able to fix the image. Next, he tried bitumen of Judea, which is a kind of asphalt, which hardens on exposure to light. It wasn't until 6 to 7 years later, in 1822, that he managed to capture a photograph copy of an engraving superimposed in glass. In 1826 and 1827, he made a view from his workroom on a pewter plate using a camera. This was the first permanently fixed image. In 1826, Niepce produced another heliographic, a reproduction of an engraved portrait, which was etched by a Persian engraver, Augustin Francios Lemaitre, who managed to pull 2 prints. Niepce didn't just solve the problem of reproducing nature by light, but he invented the first photomechanical reproduction process. In 1827, Niepce addressed a memorandum on his invention to the Royal Society in London, but insisted keeping his method a secret. He couldn't do it using either chemical or optical means. This was when he eventually gave in and partnered with Louise Jacques Mande Daguerre, a Persian painter. Unfortunately, Niepce died in 1833 before Daguerre managed to reduce the exposure time through his discovery of a chemical process for development of the latent image formed from an exposure time of 20 to 30 minutes instead of 8 hours. This was done thanks to the fumes of mercury. Nice and safe experiments back then, nothing wrong with them. Then the picture was developed on a metal plate, as metal plates could take the corrosion from the mercury fumes. In 1822, Daguerre opened the Diorama in Paris, an exhibition of pictorial views. This also showed various effects induced by changing in the lighting. Daguerre also opened a diorama in Regent's Park, London, but this burnt down in 1839. On January 9th of 1839, a full description of the daguerreotype process was announced at a meeting of the Academy of Science by the eminent astronomer and physicist Francios Arago. Arago appointed Daguerre an officer of the Legion of Honor. Daguerre and the heir to Niepce were assigned 6,000 and 4,000 francs, which is £678,013 in today's money, which was the amount of 136 years of general tradesman work. That's a whole lot of money. But now we travel from France to England, where we find William Henry Fox Talbot, born in the county of Dorset. Talbot, who studied at Harrow and Trinity College, Cambridge, and a well-known mathematician, astronomer and physicist, and served in Parliament between 1833 and 1834, is best known for his development of Calotype, an early photographic process that was an improvement over the daguerreotype. Talbot's Calotype involved the use of a photographic negative, from which multiple prints could be made. Talbot published an article on this in 1835. This process he had created was photogenic drawings, where basically contact prints on light-sensitive paper. This process he had created was photogenic drawing, where basically it was contact prints on light-sensitive paper. This, however, did produce dark and spotty images. This was improved on by 1840 and was called Calotype, later the Talbotype. Talbot then patented this process in 1841. The Calotype earned Talbot a medal from the British Royal Society in 1842. In fact, the first book published with photographic illustrations was Talbot's The Pencil of Nature in 1844 to 1846. In 1851, Talbot discovered a way of taking instantaneous photographs, and his photoleic engraving, which is a process of using printable steel plates and muslin screens to achieve quality middle tones of photographs on printing plates. Now enter Edward James Mugeridge, aka Edouard Muybridge, born in Kingston upon Thames in Surrey, England. This is a man whose name you probably don't know, but whose work everyone knows. Edouard immigrated to the United States as a young man, but remained obscure until 1868. Up until this point, he had been taking photographs of the Yosemite Valley in California. It was these photographs that made him famous and landed him a job for railroad magnate Leland Stanford. The job he hired him for made him world famous to this day. hired to prove that during a particular moment on a trotting horse's gait, all 4 legs are off the ground simultaneously. That's right, Edward Mugeridge, real name Edward James Mugeridge, was the man who successfully created the first ream of film, technically. By 1877, photography had come a long way since the days of Napoleon. Edward Mugeridge created a special shutter that gave an exposure of 2/100ths of a second. He also created a lantern called supraxioscope. Supraxioscope projected an image in rapid succession onto a screen from photographs printed on a rotating glass disc. Not quite film, I know, but it's how film works, so technically he did create the first ream of film and projector. He created the supraxioscope to stop the criticism that his photographs were fake. Even before Photoshop, people still didn't believe what they saw. Mugeridge then gave lectures on animal locomotion throughout the United States and Europe. All of this, however, was a precursor through to the development of the more successful halftone plates in 1880. Halftone is a process where the image is broken up into a series of dots as to reproduce the full tone range of a photograph or tone artwork. This breaking up is usually done by a screen inserted over the plate being exposed. The quality of the image depends on the applied use for said image. When the plate was exposed and the light went through the lens, the light was broken up into a pattern of dots via a combination of interruption and diffraction effects. Newspapers had a range of 50 to 85 lines per inch, magazines were 100 to 120 lines per inch, and the etched of the time was 120 to 150 lines of dots per inch. Halftone process was mostly popularized by Arthur Rackham, who studied at the Lambeth School of Art in 1884. After studying there, Rackham worked as a staff artist for the newspaper Westminster Budget, while he began illustrating books such as the Washington Irving's R.I.P. Van Winkle in 1905 and the Grimm Brothers Fairy Tales of 1900's edition. In 1908, Rackham was made full member of the Royal Society of Painters in Watercolours. And here ends the first part of the history of film, where we found out that it goes all the way back to the late 1700s, even though film itself as something where you could capture people's movements and then show them in a massive screen wasn't made until the early 1900s, just in time to capture some of the best parts of history just before the First World War broke out, and then also was used to capture the First World War and Second World War as they happened, something that we'll dive further into in our second part. But I hope you've enjoyed this video into the history of film. Please subscribe to this channel so that you can see our film reviews and suggest anything else that you would like to see or films reviewed on this channel. This has been Quarantined This. Thank you very much for watching. Hit like and subscribe and we'll catch you later.